Okay, I don't got much time, you don't got much time, we're all gonna die. Let's talk about Love, Death, and Robots. Love, Death, and Robots is an American adult animated anthology web television series on Netflix, if Wikipedia is to be believed. Basically, it is a series of, again, adult animations that are all sci-fi that are produced by a group of people, but specifically the actual animation is done by many different studios across the globe, by many different people with many different writers and many different directors, and so many people involved in all this. And each of the actual animations, they have their own specific take on sci-fi, their own specific universes, their own specific themes and messages that separate them very drastically from each other. But one of the reasons why they work so well in this anthology, though, is because each of them have these three elements in them in their own specific way, which I absolutely adore. Basically, these three elements is each one has their own version of love, death, and robots. And by that, I mean, when it comes to love, some of them focus on like the actual heartfelt person-to-person caring about each other and supports, while others take love as the more, let's say, physical sense, showing the actual sexual and desire-based love between men and women. Or, well, men and men. Yeah, let's get on there later. When it comes to death, each one has their own specific take on it, whether or not it is the very, very realistic, very personal fear and grappling with death, or whether it is sort of a mass uncaring about your own existence and witnessing death occur around you. Each of them do have their own specific take on death. And then when it comes to robots, this is where it gets kind of tricky, because it isn't technically about robots. Robots in the title is the stand-in title for basically sci-fi setting. So obviously each of the animated shorts has their own specific sci-fi universes and settings that they exist in. In a sense, it is the robots in the title. So again, Love, Death, and Robots is about love, death, and robots. Just maybe not exactly how you'd expect as the episodes continue. Now, gonna put a clause on since we're hitting the 3-minute mark here. I highly recommend this series to anybody who loves gritty sci-fi. Anybody who isn't really into that though, or they don't think that they can stomach, on one hand, copious amounts of incredibly graphic violence that does not really care about what you think, or on the other hand, really copious amounts of sexual content that's from the outside may seem like more surface level arousal and service to the fans. Once you dig deeper into it, having it stand in as our ideal of love and care between two people in a very science-based reality, it's so much more than that. But again, if seeing these two things is particularly against your own beliefs or your own ideals or something, or it's just something that you don't really want to see, then I'd recommend not really watching this, because there's a lot of sex and violence in these animated shorts. So moving on, let's actually get into the nitty-gritty of this. I've got 4 animations in total that I want to talk about today. 3 of them basically exemplify one of these elements that I have been talking about, love, death, and robots. Well, the 4th one basically I think is the prime out of all of them that exemplifies all of them at the same time. So let's get into it. The first animation that I'd like to talk about is Zima Blue. Now, basically, to give you a quick synopsis, Zima Blue follows the artist, who is called Zima Blue. Basically, his existence is a mystery to the entire galaxy. He is an artist who basically became famous for creating these giant tapestries of existence, in a sense. These paintings that were just so phenomenally detailed and massive that people just loved them. Then he released a painting with a single blue tile in the center of it. And as things progressed, the blue space grew and grew and grew until he was making these absolutely phenomenally large tapestries of just blue, even going as far as coloring whole planets and asteroid fields as this color of blue. And nobody knows why. Following a reporter, basically, we uncover exactly how he became Zima Blue, the artist, and exactly where he came from, which I'm not going to spoil because it's a phenomenal story, but it's not exactly what you'd expect, and it's got some interesting ideas to it. But the main thing that's discussed here, and the reason why it rings in my mind and heart as being something that exemplifies the concept of love in a very strange sci-fi setting, is that it's the love of an artist versus the mutual love between two individuals on any level. It's the love of an artist to their craft, to their art, to what makes them who they are. Throughout it, we discover exactly why he started doing art, as well as he progresses, where this whole blue thing came from and how it goes all the way back to the beginning of his being. And in a sense, it is an example of artists going back to the very beginning, the very core, to put it bluntly, of why they are artists. And it's this idea of love. It's this idea of just taking satisfaction and joy out of creating something that people can appreciate. And that is how it ends, without spoiling it, with him going back to his very, very core. And this is why it stands out so much to me, because it's not showing the love of two individuals in a romantic sense, and it's not showing the love of, like a father to a son, or anybody else that is a part of their family, or even just a random individual. It is the love that a person exists off of, the love of an artist to the creator and the created. And it is so phenomenal looking at the tapestry of existence in this way and seeing just how interesting this can be and how deep it can go with its thoughts. Diving straight into the next topic, which is of course the nice, lovely, happy topic of death, we have Helping Hand. We find our main character crewing a ship by herself as she is sent off to repair a satellite that is orbiting the planets. Of course, while she's out there all by herself, she gets hit by an astronomically small and fast-moving object, and her suit is damaged and she is sent off of the station. Again, I'm trying not to spoil too much with this review, but to go into it, this is such a personal, such a terrifying showing of death, because as she's there, she has to accept the fact that there is no one close enough to save her, and she is just outside of reach of the station, and there's no way for her to get back. Unless. And she has to make a sacrifice in order to try and get back, so in order to fight against death with her last seconds, the most desperate attempts a human can possibly make. It is such a personal embodiment of death, and it is even so much better with the fact that other animations within this series, they show death as being this very impersonal, very out there, happening to other people, even if it's by the hundreds or the thousands or the millions. This takes it and brings it in and puts you directly in the path. And it makes you think, what would I do? How desperate would I be? And what would I be willing to give up to grapple with death for even another couple seconds? Now, of course, as I said, these animations within the series all handle these three topics in their own ways. So, both the animations I've been digging into up until this point have handled our third topic, which is the topic of robots, or in a sense, the sci-fi settings that they exist in, and both of them have phenomenal sci-fi settings. But again, I'd like to talk about another one, which is going to be 3 Robots. This one is a little misleading, however. The trailers that feature 3 robots as an animation make the whole series seem like this, and it's not, because 3 Robots is hilarious. It's absolutely hysterical. Like, watching the whole thing, I just couldn't get enough. It's three robots traveling like they're on a road trip through the ruins of the human race, and it is so messed up and it is so distant that I was just laughing my ass off almost every other second. Like, just everything that happens is hysterical to me. Going into the core of it, the actual episode is very much structured upon subversions, with each of its individual actions going on. And again, without spoilers, going to the end where they actually address the idea of why the human race goes extinct. And they give some very, very possible, plausible, most likely going to happen ways that the human race will all screw ourselves over and die. And then they actually tell you how they really died in this series, and it is completely ridiculous, completely hilarious, and I can still see it happening. But within the sci-fi setting, that's what makes it so good, because it takes a ridiculous scenario that, again, not much for spoilers, but it has to do with the only other living creature that you see, well, actually the only living creature that you see in the whole episode. It has to do with them. And, just not gonna spoil it, but the setting is so well done that it makes ridiculous, hilarious stand-in for human beings be just something that you can immediately relate to and just want to keep following. It's so well done. Also, it gives me an excuse to talk about how hilarious the show can be at times. Not every episode is, and only a few of them actually are more on the comedic side, but when they do decide to go comedy, they are awesome. Like, absolutely hilarious. Now, ending my conversation here, I want to talk about The Secret War, because The Secret War does a phenomenal job covering all of the topics that I've been talking about. And honestly, it was what really sparked this idea in my head, seeing all these themes play out so well. So basically, quick synopsis, Secret War follows Soviet Union soldiers in World War II, but they're not fighting Nazis, they're actually in the northern part of Russia. They're up in the tundra and whatnot. And basically they're there tracking down horrific, ghoulish creatures, which is very shocking when you first realize this, because everything looks so good that you're like, oh, it's World War II, this looks like Battlefield, it's awesome. And then these creatures come out of the darkness and war just rages on as this brutal battle for life commences. And it works so well into the series that it's seamless, but at the same time it is so shocking. And that just like literally just right off the bat, that is the sci-fi setting that they exemplify so well. That's the robots in the title. And to continue to talk here, I am going to be talking in kind of reverse order, because now I'm going to talk about love and I'm going to finish with death, because the series likes to give this message that death does come last, especially when they're padding out like what episodes are going to be where. But going into love first, the love that is representative in this episode is a father and son love, a very familiar love, where basically you find out that the young boy involved in this unit is the son of the commanding officer. And the entire unit has just adopted him as basically a younger brother. And then obviously there is the father to son love that goes on there, where it can be a little rough at times, but he does truly care for them. As the story progresses, and like many military sci-fis, a sacrifice is required when war is waged. And the unit has to stay behind, and they have to try and stop this tide of monstrosity and inhuman nature, so that then someone can get a message to the higher-ups of coordinates so they can actually end this. So they send the son away, they send the boy away, and everyone in a very, very pure but absolutely horrible, horrendous experience, they act out their love by staying behind and facing the worst fate you could possibly imagine in order to make it so one boy does not have to. And at the end of this show, at the end of this episode, gazing upon what is left of the corpses of the men that we have grown to care about, the show has one more thing to say, and that is that the human race is very, very familiar with death.